Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with Katie Ziglar. My name is Andrew Parrish, and I'm the Assistant Director of Development here at the Ackland. I'm pleased to introduce Katie today, and then after she shares some updates with you about what's going on at the Ackland, I'll bring in as many of your questions as we have time to answer. Just so you know, audience microphones are automatically muted. And if you have any questions that you did not submit when you registered for this talk, you can ask them in the chat box or in the Q&A function here in Zoom. If you hover over the Zoom screen with your mouse, you should see controls at the bottom to access the chat box and the Q&A. We expect this program to last about 30 minutes, so if you type your questions in the chat box, that will help us get to as many of them as possible at the end. Katie, who is a native of Winston-Salem and was in UNC's first class of Moorhead Scholars to include women, moved to Chapel Hill about 4 years ago to become the Ackland's 7th director. She has worked in museums for over 30 years, including 13 years as the Director of External Affairs at the Smithsonian's Freer-Sackler Galleries. She has an MA in Islamic Art and Architecture from the American University in Cairo, and she is especially proud of spurring the Acklin to make nearly a dozen purchases of extraordinary Islamic art in her time here. And as example A, you'll actually notice her background is one of those pieces that we have fairly recently acquired. And now, Katie would like to share a few words with you about what the Acklin has been up to and what we have planned for the future. So Katie, take it away.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thanks to all of you for tuning in this afternoon for a conversation about the Ackland. I'm thrilled to have you with us. I hope that you and your families are all healthy and doing well. Now, this afternoon, what I'd like to do is go over some written remarks because I have so much to share with you about the Ackland. I don't want to leave anything important out. And mainly, I want to bring you up to date on what's been happening with us over the last few months, these extraordinary months that they are. I don't have to tell you that we're living in tumultuous times. And what you might not realize is that they have affected the visual arts community just as much or just as badly as other sectors of the economy. We have been closed for 4 months, and that's a pretty negative outcome. But despite the fact that we are living with this reality, the Acklin is really buzzing. And a lot of good things are happening. So whether you are a parent at home teaching children, a docent, or an art lover in search of inspiration, the Acklin is there for you and relevant because it is so accessible online. And we're really happy about that and proud of that. So as I said, we've been closed since about 4 months, since March 18th, and you may wonder how we're doing, and the answer to that question is very well. Our staff are healthy and have learned to work remotely, efficiently with each other and on their own. They're very resilient. There's a lot of great creative thinking going on. There'll be more about that in a little bit. And very importantly, our collection itself is safe and sound. Now, speaking of the collection, you may have seen an announcement this week about a new edition of 3 works of art as a bequest from Jane Kearns to the Acklin. 2 are paintings of large size by Joan Mitchell, who we don't have in our collection at all at the moment. She's a second generation abstract expressionist painter, and we're just delighted to be having these things on their way to the Acklin eventually. And the other is a painting by Milton Avery. We do have some works by Milton Avery, but not anything by him from the decade of the 50s. And this work that we're getting dates from 1952. So this rounds out our collection of Milton Avery's work very nicely. And we're just so happy to have a recognition of this kind. And I want to mention what the Chancellor Guskowitz had to say about this the other day. He said that this gift underscores the importance of the arts to Carolina, particularly at a time when our cultural institutions are providing inspiration and joy through new virtual channels. So we are thinking about reopening, of course, and I can tell you now, I'm sorry to have to say that we don't have an exact date or time for that, but we are working very closely with the university and the state of North Carolina, and we have our own reopening task force that is meeting weekly to figure out the best scenarios for the Acklin itself. I thank all of you who filled out a survey that went around asking about what would make you feel most comfortable coming back to the Acklin and when that might be. We did a similar survey with our staff, and you won't be surprised to learn that sanitation is a top priority for everybody in both camps, those of you there and our staff as well. So when we reopen, there'll be some changes to the way the Acklin normally does business. We will be requiring guests to wear masks, visitors, and to practice social distancing. And there will be plenty of sanitation lotion all around. So don't worry about that. Now, during this time we've been closed, one of the reasons we're buzzing is that we've seized the opportunity of using the internet to literally turn ourselves inside out. And let me explain what I mean by that. On April 23rd, we premiered our brand new website, and it has helped us take programs that have been presented in a traditional way inside the museum out in the world virtually. And we've had a very unexpected and delightful consequence of this, which is that our audience size has grown by leaps and bounds. Take Art for Lunch, for example. We normally would have about 40 people in the museum for one of these conversations, but online we can have as many as 150 or more participants for that very same program. And so our plan is to offer the program virtually in real time, and also it recorded so that visitors can watch it later when it's convenient for them. So the silver lining of our interregnum here of being closed is that we have literally sped up our leap into the 21st century in two ways. One is that we've learned to work effectively from a remote location, away from the museum. And second, we have learned to put our programs on the web digitally, thereby bringing in a much larger audience. Now, as far as our ongoing work, you might ask what that is, and I'll tell you it's a great deal. The staff is writing for a new handbook of highlights of the collection that's expected to come out within this year. We are planning a fresh reinstallation of the Asian collection in a gallery to be called Clouding, Shape and Sign in Asian Art, which opens September 11th, provided that we're open then, of course. We've been updating records for objects for our new and much improved collection search function on the new website. We've been planning future exhibitions, including the much anticipated Pet Collection Show of 2022 and originating an exhibition of works by self-taught artists called Unsettled Things, Art of an African-American South, which will actually premiere at the opening of the new International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina in 2023 before it comes back for its showing at the Ackland. We're also working with university and K-12 teachers on virtual educational opportunities and promoting activities like the 3-day Afrofuturistic Festival Intergalactic Solstice last month, which included a puppet show, a musical performance, comic drawing workshop, and family activities. It drew very good attendance over the 2 days that it ran. For most events, there were more than 3 times our in-person capacity taking part, and we're especially proud that it included in the audience viewers from Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, and as far away as Saudi Arabia. So we're not sure how they heard about us, but we're awfully glad they did, and we hope that they'll come back. So I want to thank you all for making these programs and others possible. And now I'd like to just remind you of a little of what we've covered. The topic of reopening, which is looming. We hope to settle on a date in collaboration with the university and the state of North Carolina soon. But our opening won't be like turning on a light switch. Rather, it will be more like gradually turning up a dimmer. So we'll have to respond with agility to challenges as they arise in this new world that we'll be in at that time. And your experience at the Acklin is extremely important for us. We, number one, really want you to be safe. So now Andrew is going to field some of your questions submitted in advance. And if there's time, I will answer any additional questions you might want to put in the chat box this afternoon.
Thanks, Katie. So we had a lot of great questions that were submitted in advance. And Katie, here is the first one. How will access to the museum for courses be different for instructors and students based on what we know about reopening so far?
Well, considering that we don't know that much about reopening, this is a tough question to answer, but I will say that we're planning at least to offer instruction with our art collection for UNC students in 2 different ways. Hopefully with personal visits to the museum in small numbers at a time, and then also virtually, of course. And our team has been really working hard to come up with new virtual options that maintain the core principles we adhere to when teaching in our galleries. The importance of looking closely and carefully at works of art. And you'll all remember that look close, think far is our motto. And using visual evidence to support observations and answer questions. And we'll be encouraging students to engage actively in the experience. We're also helping some faculty develop assignments that students can complete as individuals as on visits to the Acklin or in groups of 2 or 3, so that they comply with the rules of the Acklin and the campus in physical distancing. As UNC Chapel Hill's museum, it's critical to us that we support faculty and graduate instructors in this extremely challenging semester. And we're finding that, as usual, our collaborations with them can lead to interesting innovations.
And then our next question asks, could you give us an update on the Acklin's plans to expand its physical building?
Yes, I would love to do that. We have been using, since January, the services of a museum space use planning expert looking at what a future Acklin would be like. And this means determining exactly how much space will be needed for different kinds of museum activities at the Acklin over the next 20 to 25 years. We are going to have a report out to each of you that later this fall about this. And I will say that a new Acklin building, though very, very much needed, is still a few years down the road. And we know that the coronavirus pandemic may continue to impact our economy in unforeseen ways for quite a while. But nevertheless, we are very excited to have nearly completed this important step in the process of getting to a new building.
And then we had a question about how are you incorporating the work of artists of color into your collection at the Acklin?
That's a great question. When I arrived at the Acklin 4 years ago, I was very pleased to learn about the diversity of the collection, especially over the past decade to 20 years. The Acklin has pursued a number of important acquisition initiatives that align with this very question. We've built up one of the largest museum collections of art by African American artists of the American South, connected to the Souls Grown Deep Foundation in Atlanta to start with. We've embarked on a comprehensive collection of drawings and sculpture by Inuit artists. We've greatly expanded our collection of Asian art, including Islamic. And we have an explicit focus within our collecting plan on Latin American photographers. We've also committed to acquiring works by each of the artists undertaking commissions for our art and space. And there deliberately, we're including a high proportion of artists of color.
And would the Acklin consider an exhibit focusing on the interpretation of artworks through a political and cultural lens?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. We're making a long-term commitment to ongoing engagement with social issues. Our new programming will be responsive, and responsiveness is one of our 3 core values, along with rigor and fun. And our program will be grounded in art from the Acklin. So we have that art to start with, which will set off lots of great conversations. And to the extent possible, these programs will be held at the Acklin, but they can also be done virtually. And in fact, we'll expect to do them both ways. Our first initiatives involve voices representing LGBTQ and the Black Lives Matter movements.
And then somebody asked about the current status of the Acklin and the Eaton trust funds. Could you say a bit about the Acklin's endowments and how they are being used?
Yes, I'm happy to. So the Acklin has a number of endowments that help us pay for very specific museum functions. Many of them are written for something particular like acquisitions. And they have strict restrictions, most of them, and we're very diligent about honoring those restrictions. The Eaton Trust, in particular, is one of our older trusts, and it's used for acquisitions and for taking care of the Eaton collection, maintenance and care as needed. We also have an Acklin Fund, which started out with the Acklin itself, and we have traditionally, over the last few decades, used half of the funds that come from it for spending for specific operating costs like educational and curatorial activities, and the rest for acquisitions. So this year, because we are so financially challenged by the circumstances provoked by the COVID pandemic, I have sought permission from the founders of funds or their families to use some of our endowments meant for acquisitions for general operating funding. This move is approved by the Association of Art Museum Directors, which includes directors from the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And in some cases, in asking for this permission, I've been successful, and in other cases not. And some are still, the jury is still out. So while we're fortunate to have these endowments, another type of our funding, which is private unrestricted donations, has taken a major hit during the pandemic, just like so many other businesses have suffered losses. And that's why unrestricted giving is so important to us. It makes so much of what we do possible and enables us to allocate resources to our core operations and the scope of our, increase the scope of our work.
Yeah, and then our last prepared question that was submitted in advance is something that those of us who have gotten very used to being on screens, it addresses that topic. It's asking, do you have any recommendations for using art to overcome screen or Zoom fatigue?
Indeed, and I appreciate the fact that you're all here Zooming yet again this afternoon with us. We are glad to have you, but I do understand I get Zoom fatigue myself, and I do find that looking at art is a wonderful respite. It is, it can be anything from a picture on your own wall to a drawing by a child on your refrigerator. And the Acklin itself certainly has a plethora of art to choose from, everything from joy and appreciation of color and line to more serious topics that are represented in the art itself. So I would advise everybody to let the creative and imaginative parts of your mind take a front seat while the Zoom part of your mind takes a back seat, at least part of each day. And when the museum does reopen, we hope you'll come and visit us and let the Acklin's collection be part of your much needed respite from the working world.
Yeah, I actually took a lunch break today with my 3-year-old and actually created art out on our front porch with chalk.
Oh,
so
great.
That was how I got over some of my Zoom fatigue. So now let's see what additional questions our audience members have submitted here in the chat or the Q&A box. If anyone has a question that wasn't answered and you'd like to share it with us, just please type it into either the Q&A section or the chat box, and we would be happy to answer it. So Katie, here's a question that asks, how is the Acklin supporting the creation of new digital content? Has the museum added new staff to help create all of the new online options that have shown up recently?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And the short answer is no, we have not added any staff. We're actually not in a position to be able to do that at the moment. But we have had a working group, a digital working group from across the museum departments meeting until quite recently weekly to come up with ideas about digital products that can be made and how to do things best, what the tricks of the trade are, etc. And we hope to continue the emphasis on this even after we return to the world as we previously knew it, so to speak.
And then, Katie, we also had a question about membership benefits and asking what membership benefits are available while the museum is closed.
Unfortunately, we're not really in a position to deliver a lot of the benefits that members would ordinarily be receiving, such as invitations to opening receptions for our new exhibitions and chances to come to the museum and interact with the staff and special guests. But we are doing things like this Zoom call today, especially for members and other kinds of donors to the museum. And we look forward very much to being able to get back into the swing of things when we have a whole new roster of membership benefits that match along with our new membership program that you could read about at acklin.org. And in fact, there's even a parking is available at one of the levels and above. So we're very excited about that.
And then, Katie, somebody asked if the Acklin will ever offer more online access to the curators. The person said, we'd love to see Zoom curator chats, for example.
Yeah, well, we've done a few of those already. We've had some YouTube videos created before we actually had to face the coronavirus crisis. And we certainly have fabulous curators with a wealth of knowledge, and we want to feature them, and we will be doing that, absolutely.
And we also have the Monday Musings videos, which don't exclusively feature the curators, but you will see a curator pop in from time to time. So if you go to our YouTube channel on our Acklin website, you can see those Monday Musings videos, and you may see one of our curators there. And then there was another question that asked, is there any chance the Acklin will have to close permanently because of the pandemic? This person said that I've read that many museums won't survive.
Unfortunately, that is something that is discussed quite a bit. As many as 30% perhaps may not be able to reopen. And I would say that we are among the lucky 70% that will be able to reopen. We're so fortunate to be part of the University of North Carolina, which gives a lot of support to the Acklin every year through our state appropriation. And as we were discussing earlier, we have a number of endowments that also generate spending money for us each year. So though our private fundraising may be down for a while because donors either may have lost their jobs or have switched their philanthropic priorities to things like social causes and medical research, and these are very understandable things to be happening right now. We will eventually recover from this and certainly open, and that will be as soon as the state can get into phase 3 of the COVID recovery program, which we're hoping is sooner rather than later.
And then, Katie, somebody asked, what is the best way that we can support the Acklin during this time?
That's such a great question. And first of all, to come here today and be a part of our conversation is a great way of showing your support. And we appreciate it very much. If you're not already a member of the Acklin, we do have this newly launched program, and we would love to have you join at whatever level feels most comfortable for you. And we also appreciate donations that are either for unrestricted purposes, that's the most useful kind of funds we can possibly have, or for programmatic work of different kinds, for example, exhibition support.
So we have maybe like a minute left, and so if there's maybe one more question that anybody wants to ask, we'll be happy to answer it. All right, well, I think that is about all the time we have for today. Katie, would you like to say anything to conclude?
Thank you, Andrew. I would very much like to tell everybody that I hope you'll feel free to reach out to museum staff about anything at any time. Even though we aren't open at the moment, we're still here for you. And I want you to know that I personally am working hard on the dream of creating a new Acklin. I spend a lot of time on this, and it's because it's not a want, it's an absolute must. We are a key point of connection between the university and the community, and a better Acklin will only do that job in a better, even transformational way. So I thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and hope to see you in person very soon.